I'll start by focusing on the positive. There's clearly a whole bunch of people that care about this situation in Wausau. I can tell you that our police department is one of them. And there's a lot to unpack in the comments that you just heard. What may surprise people is the amount of comments I just heard that I totally agree with. There are some I don't, and we can talk about that in regards to this request. But the things that I do agree on, and this council and anyone who's taken the time at my open invite to come meet with me, whether they be elected officials or members of the community, or asked me to come meet with them, I have taken every opportunity. And it is to advocate that, number one, my request here is not a solution to homelessness in this community whatsoever. I've made that abundantly clear. The solutions to homelessness I've articulated. There are different types of people and different types of homelessness. I categorize them based on our police experience. So my definition is three categories. We have individuals utilizing resources who are working really hard to claw their way out of homelessness, and we do our best to support them, and I congratulate them. We have other individuals who are not availing themselves of resources, but to be honest with you, they're not committing crimes, they're not violating our ordinances, and they don't interact a whole lot with our police officers. They may interact with Tracy Rieger, who you've heard about tonight, and with a goal of motivating them to utilize resources and to improve the situation. But they're not a problem for our police department. And then there's another component that I would consider chronically homeless, who are resistive to resources that would help them leave homelessness, but they are committing crimes and ordinance violations and really dramatically impacting the quality of life in our parks, in our library, and in our parking ramps. So when we talk about homelessness as a whole, again, this is not a solution. The solution needs to, I heard, affordable housing. I've said that before. We're short 5,000 units of housing in this county. It has dramatically impacted the price of housing, and that is an issue to be addressed. I can't fix that from the police department. Mental health and AODA resources that are available, that are robust, and can be delivered to people in the situation they're in. And I'll clarify that because I don't want it to be confusing. Getting someone an appointment to potentially get AODA treatment or mental health treatment in this community does not happen next week from the point in time in which they are willing to accept those resources. And within this population, we don't get to schedule an appointment a month out and expect them to be there at 2:15 to fill out the appropriate paperwork to start going down the path of recovery or case management or whatever those resources are. So when we talk about resources in this community, they have to be able to be delivered in an effective way, and that way is not consistent with how much of the rest of our community would receive those services. I advocate all day long, every day, that we address those issues. And by we, I don't necessarily know that it's this council that can fix that, or this city, or the county. Anybody that wants to look, I spoke to the Health and Human Services Committee at the county, because one of the things I heard from this council was, where is the county in this process, and how can they be more involved? And I took that opportunity and that invitation, and that was one of the issues I addressed with them, is how do we get the county on board and engaged, and in what ways can they do that? And there are some creative opportunities that exist out there that can significantly impact, and we need the partnership of the county to do that. And so that was a first step in that process. I speak to the county on a regular basis, and the county administrator, Lance Leonard, and we talk about what I see as a significant gap. Tracy does spectacular work, and at the next public health and safety meeting, she's not coming with a success story. She's going to come with some of the failures where we have, and by we I mean mostly her, has successfully got people housed, and how those turned out to be failures because those individuals didn't have the supports or resources or ability to successfully be housed. And we're right back to where we started from, if not worse. So the transitional housing that has supportive components that are built into it, and those supports need to be tailored to different individuals in different situations. I brought a proposal that we partnered with CW Solutions to this body to be able to talk about what that is. And now I'm seeking a way for the county that might have funding solutions for transitional housing using different federal Medicaid dollars to be able to help put some of those things in place. So the upside for me sitting here and listening to public comment, whether it's for or against what we want to do, is I realize there are people that care, and if I focus on the things that we agree on, there are many. Some of the things we don't agree on, I didn't hear, and I don't have a solution to bad behavior occurring in our downtown that's impacting the ability of people to be effective doing business, to impact the ability of people to utilize resources in our community like our parks, like our library, and we're seeing a negative impact. And what we're seeing is violations of our ordinances and violations of our laws. And the question is that okay? Because the alternative is we turn a blind eye to that behavior that's occurring. I have no interest in criminalizing homelessness or making a person's situation worse than it is. Our police officers, though, are tasked with enforcing the laws, ordinances, and standards of this community, and that is what they are trying to do. Those of you that took my invitation and came and watched just the last 2 or 3 weeks of video of our engagement in one particular location in downtown saw behaviors, and the answer isn't sending case managers or Tracy to deal with them. These are situations that require multiple police officers to be able to respond. Some of them involve weapons, some of them involve violence, some of them just involve the violation of our ordinances. The funds that we've allocated, strike that. The funds that have been volunteered to this community to help fund these 2 officers for 2025, it's not funds to this community or this council to use how you please, and so that's for officers. So if there's a desire to reallocate those dollars, that would require going back to foundations. I have listened. I spoke with Alder Watson earlier today, and we looked at, are there better ways to facilitate resources, and where does Tracy fit into being an employee of this city? And I absolutely am open to all those different solutions. What I will tell you is I would really struggle as a responsible police chief to not have this be a team of officers, because when our officers are responding to these situations over the last 6 months specifically, they're not one officer calls. They're not one officer calls because of the behaviors that we're seeing or the potential safety issues. And again, I'll reiterate that I'm coming forward outside my desire. I don't want to be here asking for more officers. I really wish I didn't feel like the department needed additional staff to address this issue. I'm coming right now because of what we have seen over the last 2 or 3 months as a dramatic increase in the amount of unhoused individuals, and the behaviors that we're seeing are getting more dangerous, and they're creating more issues in our downtown. And so it is simple for me. This isn't a solution, but I know that a police department, their job is to enforce the laws and ordinances, and I know that if we have a team that can focus specifically in the geographic areas where we're seeing laws being broken and ordinances being violated, they can do 2 things. One, they can be more preventative. We can start addressing issues before they become issues instead of being solely responsive, which is what we are right now. We see an issue, we go respond, and we deal with it. Yeah, I heard a comment earlier, this sounds like just enforcement. It is. That's what police officers do. They enforce the law. We will also drive people to resources. We will take every avenue possible to change behavior. We do that whether it's a 16-year-old that's speeding or whether it's people with more significant crimes. Like, I don't want to lock anyone up forever. Contrary to popular belief, it's not a lot of fun. And so we want to get people help. We want to change behavior. And I know that that's possible because we see people in all different types of homelessness in our community, and some are really reducing the quality of life here and others aren't. And so we want a reputation that you don't get to behave that way in our community, and we make our downtown a safe place to be. So it's that simple to me. I looked at this, and the reason I'm here is I look at the behaviors that we're seeing. I ask myself, is that okay in Wausau? And my answer was no. And whose job is it if it's not okay? And the answer is you call the police. And I'm the police chief here saying, giving us 2 additional officers and letting us move forward with that allows me to have those individuals impact that problem in what I think will be the most effective way possible.
Committee questions for Chief Barnes? None? Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You brought up the foundation element and what someone had mentioned earlier about potentially reallocating funds to something that perhaps the community felt was a better way to address some of these issues. But then at a later time, it was said that those are earmarked apparently by the foundation for only doing one thing. And correct me if I'm mistaken, I don't know the dynamics and how the funding unfolded, but is the one thing then to pay for 2 police officers to enforce the types of things downtown that you've been describing specifically with the unhoused population?
I would say you're partially correct in your assessment. No, number one, the foundation has offered to pay for 2 police officers. They didn't give us flexibility in their offer to split that money and fund other things other than 2 police officers for 2025. And the second half is here just to enforce these things. Part of my communication to the foundation when I asked for a willingness to help us fund this included not only enforcing our laws, standards, and ordinances, but much discussion about how those officers can create positive outcomes with individuals that aren't necessarily taking them to jail. And to be honest with you, those are things we expect of our officers to do right now. And there's lots of stories of our officers working within the unhoused population that don't involve taking someone to jail or issuing an ordinance citation. We're looking to change behavior and ensure that we're not just addressing a small population, comparatively speaking, to the 40,000 residents in Wausau, but we're the police department for the whole city, and we see how that impacts this whole community as well, and we have responsibilities to everyone involved. So I think those are issues where, what are some other things these officers are going to be doing that increase the quality of life in our downtown? How do we get people to resources? And how do we ensure that all of our resources aren't going to one specific geographic area or addressing one population of individuals? We want to make sure the entire city stays safe and we're available to them.
Thank you. And then you touched on what was going to be my next question. It was because I'm unfamiliar when the private sector is going to be paying for the salaries of public police officers, and that's occurring apparently outside of like a typical city financial or budget process. How did that work? So who goes to the did they offer to do it themselves? Did someone from the city go to the foundations and say, hey, will you pay for this? Who did that, and how does that work?
Sure. We have a long-standing relationship with the foundations. There are times that foundations call me and ask for a sit-down and talk about what are the issues and how can they be involved. In this particular case, I reached out to them and said they had a desire to have a conversation about what they're seeing as the atrophy of our downtown and our business district, and asked me, what would you do, Matt? And I said, I'd hire 2 cops and put them on a team and have them focus on this. And their offer was to fund those. So that is something I did.
Okay, thank you. So they brought up atrophy of a business or economic district, and then your suggestion was more police officers that would be paid by the private sector. Is that an accurate summary?
The more accurate statement would be they were willing to fund those officers. The conversation was much more robust than you had just shared. That conversation involved resources, other areas that I felt they could be financially contribute to this community in the form of resources and gaps to be filled. I think I don't want to speak for them, they're not here, but I really feel like they were willing to fund this right now at a very high level because they felt like that is something there can be an immediate impact, and an immediate impact is necessary in our downtown. So again, I don't want to speak for them, but the fact that they're coming with in excess of $230,000 of funding that in 2025, they've seen these same issues and they feel that it could have a positive impact. The foundations also have a history going back. I have a document that goes back into the early 80s of funding positions and programs within this community to include police officers as well as other staff.
And then just the last kind of composite of questions is based on kind of segments of the unhoused in Wausau. So, and the public tonight talked about how it wasn't exclusively, an issue with citizens that have mental health or alcohol and drug addiction issues. But I am wondering, with the unhoused population in Wausau, what percentage of them would you estimate do have perhaps mental health issues?
Well, I think it'd be absolutely fair to say the majority. So I can't really give you a number, but I think our staff feel like, and they're not trained psychologists but I think based on their interactions and the behaviors and listening to the stories of individuals, because that's something that we do, there's a significant number. I just am not comfortable saying 70% or 60%, but well over half. And I think, I don't have eyes in the back of my head, but those individuals that work with this population, my hope is they're nodding their head in agreement to me that that's the situation.
Would it be similar also for the segment of individuals with alcoholism or alcohol and drug addiction challenges, would you think?
Yeah, I would say individuals that are abusing substances. I mean, some are more chronic than others, but that would definitely, I would also include that's the majority.
And what percentage would you estimate are veterans? Do they over-index?
I would say this, that we have engaged with some veterans over the last several years. We're fortunate in that we have resources within the VA and locally that we can reach out to that are more robust resources and are available to the average unhoused member of our community. I would invite Tracy if maybe she has more specific data on veterans, but I don't think when we look at our unhoused population that everybody matters, but there's not a significant number of them where we're like, there's our veteran population of unhoused in our community.
And then just you had decades in law enforcement experience. I know the answer, but I kind of like it on the record from the expert. Is my layperson understanding that unhoused individuals are not the only individuals that break in entering or smoke crack? Am I correct? And I don't even know what it looks like to smoke crack. Chamber staff and leadership knew that. I have no idea what that looks like. But so are there people that aren't poor or that break the law and use drugs as well?
Well, I mean, I don't
Do
know
you
if
keep
that's...
videos of them that you show people, like
Yeah, I
wealthy
don't know.
people that you show videos
I don't know if
of
that's a
crimes?
rhetorical question, but I would state this for the record, of course, which is anybody that's going to be breaking the law, or if an alder goes to our park and breaks the law, I would expect our officers to address that with them, take appropriate enforcement action. Criminalizing homelessness is rather insulting to police officers because we engage with behaviors. And one of the reasons I separated the population of unhoused in our community early in my comments is there's a significant number of our homeless population that we as officers don't engage with from enforcing anything. Sitting on a park bench is not against the law. We're not engaged with them. That's not something our officers would walk up and deal with. It's the behaviors that they're displaying that we do, and that's true whether you're unhoused or whether you're housed. So to answer your question, we investigate a whole lot of crime, much of which doesn't have to do with our unhoused population, but the crime that we're discussing here today, we see really negatively impacting your district, the downtown, our library. We hear from library staff about the impact on them and the future of the library. We see the result in our parks, and we don't write the ordinances or the laws. We are tasked with enforcing that, and that's what I'm asking for help to do here today.
Thank you for bringing up that last part. It does raise some additional questions from me. So the position or assertion that everything is being enforced kind of equally across the board, I guess perhaps there's an element of semantics or kind of logic contortion there, because I believe what you've been and others have been describing have essentially related to in the past what might be considered vagrancy law. So let's use an example and then talk about why it doesn't make sense to assert that enforcement across the board is either kind of logical or just. So when you have someone sleeping in a park in a tent, yes, we have codes and standards and so forth regarding that, but generally most who would be doing that in town don't have a house or a roof to sleep under, or often even an alternative, like if they go to the shelter one night, don't make the lottery and are turned away. So while that law may apply to everyone, clearly those who are going to be sleeping in parks and public spaces consistently, I would gather, I would even bet dollars to donuts, are really the unhoused. So while that law applies to everyone, we really don't have like a McMansion owner in Riverview sleeping at Oak Island consistently, because that would be silly, right? So I guess I accept the assertion that enforcement across the board would occur, but it's also kind of self-evident that those enforcement scenarios would only apply to the poorest in the community. So perhaps that's less of a question than my commentary, but that's certainly how I feel about that assertion. Thank you.